All right, I'll kick off. I'll kick off with this get to know you question. My pastor loves using this question to get to know people better. And his question is this, like, what is your favourite aisle in the supermarket? So we'll kick off with you, Justine. What is your favourite aisle in the supermarket?
Oh, gosh.
No judgment.
I like the cheese section, actually. It makes me feel a bit rich sometimes.
Nice, okay. And Steve, what's your favourite aisle in the supermarket?
Look, I think the default answer should be the confectionery aisle, but I actually really like that aisle because on the other side there's all the flavoured waters and stuff. So like you kind of feel healthy, but you're eating sweets.
Yeah, nice, nice. My one is the breakfast cereal aisle.
Yeah, right.
So when I was single, you know, it was that 8 items or less thing. I'd always go through with 6 boxes of Sultana brand and 2 bottles of milk. That was my and it was breakfast, lunch and dinner. Okay, I might kick off with this one because it's interesting that you pushed us in the Asian versus Caucasian thing, because I was actually sitting during Steve's presentation thinking, oh, this is a Caucasian phenomenon, the the imposter syndrome. It couldn't exist in the Asian context.
Gosh, do you know your own people, Sam?
Because Steve was saying part of the problem is we're always being given encouragement awards, always being told how wonderful we are, so we feel like, I'm not as good as you think I am. Whereas we know in the Asian context, you're always being told how stupid you are. Like in the Asian context, they're afraid to give you compliments. Like, you know, like up front, if someone says to you, to your parents, you know, your child is very smart, they'll say, no, my child is stupid, because they're worried they're going to inflate your ego and you're going to get lazy and stop studying. So I thought in the Asian culture, you never feel like an imposter because you're always being told how stupid you are.
Really? Don't you see the absolute logic of what you're saying? If you're being told how stupid you are, then you'll go on believing that, despite all disconfirming evidence.
Okay, yeah, I never thought of that.
Yeah, let me school you, Sam.
I don't feel like I belong up here. You should be doing this job. All right.
I do normally, actually.
Yeah. And I'm using this setup, a question I did get for real, and so we've looked at cultural differences, but now we're looking at gender differences. So the question is this, you know, does the imposter syndrome manifest itself differently in men versus women? So I'll let both of you have a go at this. So how do you think it shows differently in men versus women?
There might be a case that men repress it more, whereas women will kind of, like men will repress and just deal with it, whereas women will just be like, and then have to talk about it with some people, maybe. There might be that sort of dynamic.
So it's kind of interesting. I actually would have almost argued the opposite.
Oh, wow,
that the expectation is, as a male, that you would probably not have these things, or you know, you're confident and you're just confident because you believe that you're, you know, kind of good at what you do. And interestingly, the 2 projects that happened internally around imposter syndrome were led by mostly women groups. So,
yeah, right.
I honestly don't have an answer, only having one view of this. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard, like, because it's asking us to stereotype, but if I'm allowed to stereotype, I know as a guy, if I'm given something I know I can't do, I see that as, you know what, I'll give it a go anyway. What could possibly go wrong? That's how I...
Well, actually, yeah, the research sometimes says that, like, that women may let themselves be held back by that fear, whereas men are a bit more kind of like laissez-faire about it.
So you see the skill gap. Some people might see it as a threat, where you're going to be exposed, whereas some people might see the skill gap as, you know what, this is an opportunity to try something I've never done before. I work in medicine, by the way, and I work in surgery, and we're often thinking, you know what could possibly go wrong?
Which hospital was that?
A nameless hospital out west.
I would actually agree. I would agree with that view that I was surprised that this is such a statistic. I would have assumed that most people would just jump on and say, okay, well, I do this job well about 60% of the time, so maybe I should go for this job. It's actually encouragement that I give to a lot of people, which I stopped doing about 2 years ago or a year and a half ago. Was, look, just jump in, be awesome, and you'll be fine, right? Like just get out there and have a go. And I stopped giving that advice because one of the main people I was giving that advice to was like, just stop layering me with pressure, right? Like you're kind of saying, go out there and be awesome, like it's easy. Please don't do that. Just, you know, let me be me and work my way to awesome rather than, you know, kind of just jump straight into it. And I had, immediately after that comment, I had about a 16-hour flight to think through it. And when I get to the other end, I'm like, yeah, I'm never doing that again. I'm never going to tell someone just be awesome. It's too much pressure.
Wow. Yeah, so it's amazing because what you saw would be an opportunity for him and maybe other people he saw as a threat. So people respond differently to different stimuli.
Definitely.
Maybe.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, here's a question that's come through specifically to you, Steve. Can Steve talk a bit more about managing a person with imposter syndrome? So not being the person with imposter syndrome, but managing that person.
I had a really interesting comment putting this together around some of the people that I've mentored over the last few years. And in particular, one of the comments stood out as, hey, I'd just given them a bunch of work to do. And it was a lot of work. They'd kind of just started it and only then just realized how much work it was. They were feeling pretty confident about it before then. And they shot me a message and said, you didn't tell me this was 52 pages of stuff I needed to do. I thought I was going to be done in like 10 minutes. And I jokingly just said, look, hey, there's an audiobook version if you need it, but you're going to have to go through this form. Like, kind of trying to playfully encourage them to do the work. And they just shot straight back with, look, it'd be really great if you could just give me your regular encouragement of, I can do this. Like the audio track of this, if I was doing an audiobook, would be you just saying, you can do this, you've got this, and just every now and then kind of encouraging me. So for me, it was interesting because I just do these things by default because of the insecurity I have in the work that I do. You have to strike a balance between projecting that insecurity on the other person and having them just constantly feel like, look, I actually know what I'm doing, please stop pretending like I don't, while also kind of encouraging them to seek help and ask for assistance if they need it, but really talking up their success. And I think you don't have to manage someone to play a part in that or play a role in that. If someone's being successful or they do something amazing, I work with a lot of peers more than I work with people that I manage. And for me, talking up their success to other people and talking about their success to them is a great way of kind of bringing them up. Always trying to elevate other people.
Yeah, that's amazing. I never thought of it that way. You got two jobs. You got to manage them, but then you have to manage yourself because you're projecting your fears and insecurities upon them. So somehow you too have to be sort of successful. It's like getting kids out of the house in the morning. Hurry up, hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. The more you do that, more stressed they are. But it's because you're stressed. You're the one running late, not them. And you've projected that upon them. So somehow you've got to manage yourself as well.
Yeah, and actually one of so I was only recently a new manager, I guess, in leading these people and trying to do their career development. I'd managed teams before where I just told them what to do. And this was the first time at Atlassian that I'd had to kind of say, hey, actually, I care about your growth as a human being and as an employee. Like, let's make sure we manage this properly. The hardest thing for me was actually sometimes sitting in a meeting and knowing that they had to do a certain number of certain things, or they were going to be really off track. And hearing them talk through their problems and talk through their experiences, and just only really be able to ask them questions and kind of suggested guidance because they need to go out and make these mistakes anyway. They need to go out and have these experiences. You can't live your life, like their life for them, and you can't live their career for them. And that goes back to that fluctuation of sometimes you're going to have bad experiences or do something not well, but that's how you learn and improve. And if you're not doing that early in your career, when you get to your later career, you just can't handle that at all.
Can you please tell us more about how the imposter syndrome, perfectionism, and anxiety tie together?
Oh
my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, each one of these would be
So
a whole
perfectionism and
paper.
imposter syndrome and anxiety. So perfectionism, I'm still puzzling this out because they say that it's like trying to be perfect. It's like, I'm not trying to be perfect. Like perfect seems like an objective standard. But I think what they mean is that I impose my own impossibly high standards. And for me, that's my version of perfect onto whatever I want to do. And anything that falls short of that is like failure. So to make it very kind of like, give a very concrete example, any article that you would read on The New Yorker, The Atlantic, these sorts of publications, that's what I consider my version of perfect. And I want to do that. The fact that I don't write like that, or I haven't worked like that, or I haven't written like that, and I haven't been validated by those outlets, crushing, right? Okay, so that's where the anxiety comes in. And then I'm going, oh, fine, I can't do that. Why would I even be employed? This is my job, to kind of do this sorts of stuff. So the anxiety, the perfectionism, the imposter, I'm sure you can see how it all fits together. It's one of the worst things about it is just being trapped in your own head, really. And that's why I think the judgment of other people, which you also mentioned as well, is so validating. Like the fact that I can look around and kind of go, hang on, that person and I really can talk well together and we understand like what we can really have a really good conversation. I think they're really bright. And I think they're really smart and they're really smart. Oh, okay, so maybe, just maybe, I might have something useful to contribute as well. Like I do think like none of this kind of self-realization crap that says trust yourself, be yourself. No. Actually, when it comes to something like imposter syndrome, you can't be yourself because you think you're an actual fraud. So you need to trust the judgment and the validation of other people.
I think that perfectionism has a lot of side effects that are really bad too. Like if you set yourself an impossible standard and you know, even if you deliver on it, you will still think later that you could have done better. It's like, well, if I'm not great and that was my perfect, then obviously I'm not even great at, you know, judging what perfect is. So therefore, you know, it could be better. And that's actually something that I really struggled with releasing projects. It's like you put out a feature. You know, you might even read press articles about it and how amazing it is, and you just ignore it. You're like, no, it could have been better. You guys aren't exposed to what it could have been, so therefore you don't know what you're missing out on.
I think I also want to mention that, you know, like when you're a perfectionist, you have impossibly high standards, and sometimes you can struggle with not imposing those high standards onto other people. But one thing that I think is really helpful for me. And you know, I've talked about being tiger parented and stuff like that. The reason I'm able to have compassion, I hope, towards my family situation is that the stuff that I got from them is nothing compared to what I think they experience internally, if that makes sense. So everyone's their own harshest critic. So if you feel like burnt by a perfectionist, they're roasting in the fire that they've created for themselves as well. So that helps to be compassionate as well.
Yeah. Interesting you mentioned the New Yorker. The New Yorker makes all of us feel inadequate because friends are always saying, oh, did you read the New Yorker? Did you read the New Yorker? I think, no, I didn't. and so I took a subscription and I just watched these magazines just pile up on my desk. I could not read them. So every day, every week a new one comes, I think, that's another one I'm not going to read. And at the end of the year, I just cancel the subscription. And I reckon anyone who quotes the New Yorker, they're bluffing. No one has read the New Yorker. The articles are so long. And the cartoons aren't even funny. I don't get the cartoons. Everyone goes, the cartoons are the funniest. I thought, they're not funny. I don't get it. So on that, maybe this segues into this one. Justine, I'll get you to kick this off. Should we just then be more honest with our faults to avoid being an imposter? Because it seems like this nuclear arms race where we have to outdo each other. I've read the New Yorker. Well, I have too. Can't we all just say, you know what, I haven't read the New Yorker and the cartoons aren't funny. I don't get them.
I think that in a social media age where we can curate our image and curate all that sort of stuff, we can create a feeling of everything looks great, you know, everything's fine, and yet underneath we're a quivering wreck. So that is a direct kind of social impact on how we might be real with each other. But I also think that you know, we're living in the age of authenticity. You know, I was going for like a kind of Oprah meets Jenny Brockie meets like Brené Brown sort of vibe, and like sharing a story like that. Like, you know, I mean, I don't normally talk in such personal terms, but I did tonight. But we live in the age of authenticity that really values wanting to hear people's stories and wanting to see truth, you know, like happen from a platform. So I think, you know, like, I mean, I really think that at base people feel scared that if they are truthful and tell people what it's really like for them, that people do feel like they're going to be rejected. And sometimes that you know might happen, which it makes us all freak out. But I really hope that if you're a human and I'm a human, then we all have had the same experience, so we know what it's like to feel vulnerable. And I think we do honour that vulnerability when we see it in other people. That's just my Oprah way of saying it.
Yeah, I think Atlassian in general is such an open company. The things we talk about internally and we share with each other is I've never had that experience at any other company. You know, you have people sharing very intimate, very personal stories about struggles they're having. You know, whether it's a win at work or it's a win at home, or it's a struggle at work or it's a struggle at home. So that openness is a really it's protective in a lot of ways because it allows you to open up and share and kind of learn from each other, and also kind of open up your own vulnerability and say, actually, I think something's wrong. You know, can you help me and can we talk this through? but I don't know. I've seen this work on both sides. I'm normally an open by default person, and there's some things that I do to hold myself in check to that. So on social media, for example, if I delete something or edit something, I'll actually and I repost it. I'll actually add a tag at the end which just says ed to say that I've edited it for whatever reason, because I'm often just waiting for someone to go, "Hey, you deleted a tweet. What was that about?" Or call me out on something. It's terrifying in a lot of ways, but they kind of help me validate that openness and staying open. I have to admit though, being open or being so open has worked against me before, and it's hard to take those negative experiences and just completely. You never completely ignore them, but it's hard to kind of take those in balance and say, I'm going to be open again because I know that ultimately this is the best thing to do when you've had those kind of terrible experiences. And as is with most mental health issues, for a lot of people, when you open up about mental health issues, there is a perception that actually this is not great. You're not healthy, right? And this is a challenge that we need to kind of overcome. And by everyone kind of coming on board and Atlassian getting behind it, as Justine mentioned, the CEO or the co-CEO of the company got up and did a TED talk on the fact that he has imposter syndrome, and he shared this with the company. He's constantly waiting for someone to stand up and say, "Hey, you don't actually make that great software, or you don't actually know what you're talking about. You're just kind of winging it." And that openness allowed everyone else to open up, and it's something that has to come, from the ground, but also from the top. But ultimately, is better.
Thanks. All right, Steve, you got some because you talked about feedback in your talk, and there's several questions, so I'll just lump them all together.
Just give me the good ones.
Okay. and okay, I'll just throw them at you, see how you'd go. How do you support someone who reacts badly to feedback? So that's one question, but I'll throw this one in as well. How do you yourself seek feedback at work when you feel this will expose yourself as a fraud?
I've been on a journey with my feedback in a lot of ways. It's like Justine, I struggle with perfectionism, and so we have annual performance reviews where you get a lot of feedback from a lot of people you work with, and they all kind of give a summary of how your interactions with them have gone, what you need to improve on. And we've improved on this process over the years, but it's really hard to hear any negative feedback about how you do your job when you're feeling so particular about it. So I've not always reacted as well as I could when my manager's like, "Hey, here's the 25 things that we got feedback about. You 23 or 24 are great. This is one thing you need to improve on." I'd be like, let's not talk about any of that good stuff. Why do they think this? Give me examples. Be really specific. So that was tough. I wasn't doing well with that. So what I actually started teaching and started trying to do myself was stop, breathe, take a step back and don't react. Because I know when I initially get negative feedback that I react in that environment poorly. So I just choose not to react. It doesn't, I can't, for some reason I haven't been able to make myself react positively. So I just don't react at first. And then I take it away, I think about it and I process it and then I come back. And my manager and I have that kind of down pat now. In terms of that negative feedback, though, I'm working on being more specific with examples. And actually, this worked against me when I had one of our kind of mentor or mentee associates reporting to me. I said to her, be sure that you get very explicit examples when someone gives you negative feedback so that you can be clear about what you need to improve on. If someone says you're always late, ask for examples, because then they might say, actually, you were just late once, and I just didn't like that, and it impacted a lot of people, I got a lot of grief about it, and so therefore please don't do that again. Whereas if they're like, well, 5 out of 5 days this week you've been late, and this is the impact it's had, that's a much easier conversation to have, because talking about the impact means that you can change your behavior, because you might think being a few minutes late is fine, but understanding the impact that has on other people, it's not fine. It's unfortunate because she used that on me later when I was giving her negative feedback. She's like, I need examples. And I'm like, I'm going to have to come back to you on that one. So I think, use examples, be explicit, be friendly, be approachable, but, be known as a person who gives constructive feedback and isn't judgmental. I think that's a key thing, is you have to have a good relationship with people. but they have to feel like you're approachable. Just telling them to go out there and be awesome didn't work. Telling them to go out there and not stuff up, that's not going to work either. You just need to kind of work out what the balance is.
Wow, that's so practical. All right, so just time for just one or two more quick questions. So just wrapping things up, it seems like part of the problem is we base life and work on a meritocracy because you got to earn marks, you get a ranking, and you got to earn your way into the job through beating other people in an interview. So there's a meritocracy problem where we gain our positions. There's another problem where we find worth in our achievements. And there's also, you got social media thrown in there. And so we don't just find worth in work or sex. It seems like you've got to have the perfect family that you got to display on social media, the perfect overseas holiday that you brag about on social media, and the perfect dinner plate that you brag about on Instagram. There should be like a little, like you say, editorials like, okay, this is a great family photo, but you should have seen the 20 other photos we had to take before this happened, like where we get all 4 kids smiling at the same time. All right, so let's wrap this up in this question then. Why is worth not a question of work then? Because you said it shouldn't be. Why is my worth not based on work or achievements, especially if achievements do make me feel good? Is that a bad thing that achievements make me feel good? That's a double complex question. You know, so in philosophy, we tell you, hey, no, they've thrown in a complex question there. So the trick is you answer yes and no. That's how you answer complex questions.
I'm just going to answer it the way that I interpret the question. Achievements are good, but it starts to feel sometimes that you are just the sum of your achievements. And when you can no longer achieve at the level that you're used to achieving, then who the hell are you, right? Like Ian Thorpe, a lot of elite sportsmen talk about this, that they're suddenly no longer out winning Olympic gold and they don't know who they are. They try and reinvent themselves, go and do a job that is unconnected with anything sporting or whatever, with their past history. And the only thing other people want to talk about is, I saw you on the games, so amazing. But they're like, oh gosh, that's not me anymore. Who am I? So I think that, achievements are great, but they do sometimes cloud our judgment as to who we really are. And what if you can't do those things anymore? Who are you? I think also that the way that we sort of judge our worth based on other people's opinions can be really toxic as well, because opinions change all the time. What are you going to do? Just change yourself always to just be ahead of the pack. So I think that it's really important to find a really stable centre to understand where your worth emanates from. And what that doesn't change according to fashion or opinion, that's not actually tethered to your work either, because then it's still dependent on you. What is the stable foundation that you can base your worth on? For me, it's a Christian thing. It's like, I know that my work has nothing to do with the fact that why God would love me, right? It's just something that He loves me, and so I am empowered to do work, but it's not that by my work that I have a good sort of relationship with Him. So I realise that not everyone buys into that, and that's fine. But I would just really encourage you, think really carefully about what is that stable foundation that you build your worth from, and can it be firm despite changes of fashion, despite your own ability to live up to that as well? I think it's a really powerful question that all of us are faced with at some point of our lives. Who am I? What am I worth? What do I base that worth on? And I think it's a really good question to think about.
Thanks. Steve?
That's a hard act to follow.
I know.
I think it is easy, to your original point, I think it is easy to present the perfect environment. You don't hear horror stories. The majority of travel stories are, I went to this amazing place, not I spent 6 hours on a bus next to a sweaty person who was asleep on me.
And my wife and I argued the whole time, did not talk to each other for 72 hours. Was that just my holiday? I thought that was normal.
I think that's what we like in I guess the rise of YouTube celebrities and these alternative people. There's people who build robots that do nothing who are celebrities on YouTube because they're just doing stuff. They're just having fun. They're pushing themselves to weird limits, but they're not holding themselves to a standard that anyone else has set. So in the field of robotics, probably not, very high on the ladder of respect around hey, they're not building autonomous dogs that can survive being kicked and are going to climb stairs and come after you in the apocalypse. But making a cool solar system thing that goes around your head, that's fascinating. And I think being able to remove yourself away from, hey, everyone thinks this is important in life, but I don't. But I find these other things important, and I find them valuable, and I find them rewarding, so I'm just going to do that anyway. I think that's the healthiest approach you can have. Unless it's something really unhealthy, like, you like making cakes, but you make one every day and you eat the whole thing.
And that becomes your identity, the cake maker. What do you do when you can't make cakes anymore?
But I think, like for me, I'm always terrified when I get up on stage and present on even something that I built, something that I know intimately, something that no one else on the planet could understand as well as I do. And I'm honestly waiting for someone in the back to stand up and say, you did that wrong, and let me tell you why. And I would honestly, if someone did that, probably get off stage and be like, you should present, not in a sarcastic way, but in a, you're obviously more intelligent than me, please come up and, these people are expecting intelligence, I'm obviously not there.
Steve, if that were to happen, I swear the person who would stand up and say, get off stage, would be you. It's like Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker, and he sees it's like, oh, that's actually me. So, meaning that you are your own harshest critic.
It's true. Actually, and on that, I was chatting to my wife earlier today. We were kind of talking about the fact that, you're printed in a brochure, and do you get comfortable with that? No, is the short answer. You never get used to seeing your face places it doesn't belong. But I think the weird thing is that I still look at talks that I gave 10 years ago where I make really stupid assumptions or assertions based on my naivety or my inexperience in the industry, but in another area where I was actually quite proficient in trying to educate people. And I look at those talks even today, I don't look at them every day, but I know of those talks and I know what they are, and I can tell you the 5 things that I most resent ever saying, and this lives with me forever. I don't ever think, hey, I gave an amazing talk 10 years ago to a group of people who are now inspired to go build software. I think, but in that talk I said this weird thing where, Twitter was a fad or some other absurd statement, and even the pronunciation of a tweet, I think I called it people tweet her out or something. Something ridiculous like that, and I'm still plagued by those feelings of, I was never in a position to give that talk, I never should have done it, and 10 years from now I might be saying the same thing about this one.
All right, so questions of worth. Do we gain worth, do we earn worth, or do we have worth just in and of ourselves? So Justine Toh, Stephen Smith, thank you very much.